What I want to talk about today, first of all, just want to commend Ben Malfers and the whole team at Moorhead, both at Moorhead State University and the community, the Innovation Center here, and the great new incubator, which we visited last night, Ellie, and everybody else for just putting together an amazing 2 days. And not just these 2 days, but what's happening here, the energy, the excitement, and the enthusiasm it's really sweeping across Moorhead. It's very infectious, and how that's being manifested in many different ways. So what I want to talk just a minute about is, and we'll leave time for questions, is just kind of the context of what's going on, and how did we get to this idea of space? How did we get to this idea of CubeSats that were invented by Bob Twiggs, who's in the audience today, who was at Stanford University? How did Ben and his team decide to take this on? How did we all partner and then begin to move not beyond just microsatellites? I don't know. Can I mention yesterday? Is it public yet? Okay. Just yesterday, for example, the Moorhead State University learned that they've been selected to be the mission lead for a CubeSat, 6U CubeSat to the moon. When you think about that, that's pretty amazing coming out of Moorhead, Kentucky. And who would have thought that 10 years ago? So how did we all get to this place? Why are we even interested in this, other than the fact that it's cool and fun, and all of us who grew up in the space age are excited about that? Well, I think it comes from a lot of things. And one is a recognition in what's happening in the economy today. We live in an era of major disruption. And you can look at that with fearful eyes, or you can look at it with excitement and opportunity. And we try to look at it as excitement and opportunity, but still being cognizant of the hurdles that we have to overcome. The economy today, or our world today, not just the economy, is really being driven by innovation, knowledge, and speed. We like to say a lot that there are two kinds of organizations in today's world: innovative and dead. And we really believe that. I mean, that idea really is what led, in a sense, to the creation of the Idea Festival, which Ellie will talk more about in a few minutes. This idea that it really is about innovation, and it's not just innovation in the sciences and math. It's innovation everywhere. It's in science, math, technology, the arts, traditional music, poetry, design, philosophy. All of these things come together, converge, and really create this explosion of innovation and ingenuity and discovery that we're seeing in the world today. And that was really the impetus behind the Idea Festival, the concept that there is no such thing as useless knowledge. And then the other is we talk about the proliferation of knowledge in today's world. We've all heard the statistics about the exponential growth of knowledge and how much knowledge has been created in the last decade versus all of you in history. And that's another. And it's not just knowledge, it's not just information, it's not just what's in your head, but it's your ability to understand that knowledge and to manipulate it and to apply it to things. Rather than just being able to regurgitate things, we now see that the people, organizations, companies, universities in today's world that are really out front are the ones that can take that knowledge, integrate it, synthesize it, and apply it in really new and creative ways. And then there's, like I said, there's the whole issue of innovation. And the speed of innovation, what is happening, things like Moore's Law, and we see it every day, and the speed at which that's occurring. If as a child, how many teachers do we have? How many teachers? I'm sure we have teachers in the room today. How many teachers do we have here? Okay. If you were teaching and a student walked in your office in 2006, early 2007, and said, "I'm really excited. I've decided on my career path. I want to do iPhone apps," you would have said, "The hell's an iPhone?" And then after that, you would have said, "I don't even know what that is, so what's an app?" And yet, today, it's over a $25 billion industry. Just less than a decade later. And we're seeing this time and time again. New ideas are being manipulated or being converged into other things. We're coming up with, and people are coming up with amazing ideas. And this is what innovation, this is what it's about. And it's the speed of that innovation, and it's picking up and it's accelerating, which is creating the world today. And I think those are some of the things. And then we have this situation too, where knowledge is making it also transforming and basically turning inside out our whole concept of work. IBM in 2013 had approximately 143,000 employees. Dell was 108,000 employees, big companies. Also, last year, when Facebook bought WhatsApp, that company, for $19 billion, they had 55 employees. That's what we're dealing with now. One of the things that's happening is knowledge is enhancing our productivity in ways that couldn't be imagined 10 or 15 years ago. And it's also making it less expensive to get into a company. We really do live in an age. We really do live in an age where a couple of guys, a couple of females can get into a garage and create a groundbreaking company, like a Steve Jobs or a Wozniak or others. And a lot of that's being driven just by the ability of the technology and the knowledge and the miniaturization of these things, that we can create enormous amounts of value that literally was impossible 30 years ago. And nobody 30 years ago, 40 years ago would have been talking about, I want to put Ford Motor Company out of business. I'm going to put the taxi cab industry out of business. I'm going to put the record company business industry out of business. And yet we have people today who are doing that, trying to do it, and are succeeding, despite all the kinds of obstacles, because the capital barriers just don't exist. And one of the things that technology is also doing is eliminating the gatekeepers, right? When I remember a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, I was out at a bookstore, and I decided, I'm going to buy a couple CDs. I hadn't bought some CDs in a while. Went in, and the CD section was gone. And I thought, what the hell's going on? And then it hit me. That industry, as we understand it, is over, right? iPhones, iTunes disrupted that industry and created and upended it in a way. And one of the reasons they were able to do it, because the technology eliminated the gatekeepers. They didn't have to go through the middleman. They didn't have to have somebody controlling the distribution of that to the customer. And that's another thing that's happening. We're seeing it disrupt all sorts of different aspects of our life, including higher education. One of the things we're seeing is that higher education, technology, online classes, and other kinds of technology are eliminating a lot of the barriers that and disruptions that universities have had. So what's all that mean in terms of context and kind of where we are with, how does this all bring us to kind of aerospace? Well, I think one of the things is that this context that we're talking about has created a situation where it's no longer good. It's no longer enough just to be good or good enough. You have to imagine a really different kind of future if you're going to succeed. In 1989, Smith Corona, some of you probably remember Smith Corona. I don't, Ben, but my father told me about it. Smith Corona had its most successful year ever. Over $500 million in profits. In 1993-94, they filed for bankruptcy. You think, well, how could that happen in just a matter of years? There were a lot of reasons for it, but one of the reasons why that happened is because they couldn't imagine a world without typewriters. And that's one of the big challenges we all have to face. I challenge every one of you in this room. I don't care what you do. I don't care how secure you are, how much money you make in your company. You have to be able to imagine. The first step is you have to imagine a world in which your product, your company, your service suddenly becomes irrelevant. And that's the key. That's the beginning of innovation. And so as we looked out across Kentucky and we're interested in new kinds of opportunities, new kinds of industries, new kinds of opportunities for Kentucky, I think one of the things we realized is that it's no longer good enough just to be a little bit better. We have to find things in Kentucky that we can do better than other people, which means we have to find things that are unique. We have to start things that we can create. When Bob Triggs created the first CubeSat, they laughed at him because they said, "This is a toy, Bob. Nobody's going to want to use this. Maybe middle school students will be able to use these at some point." But of course, we know now that it's taken over the world. And we have huge constellations of CubeSats being launched by companies raising tens of millions of dollars in Silicon Valley. The Defense Department is using CubeSats to revolutionize defense processes and security issues in outer space. And again, that started with what? It started with an idea that people thought was crazy and thought that was silly. And the other first thing we believe is that second step to innovation is you got to start it crazy. You can't start, well, maybe we'll make this a little bit better. You've got to start at crazy, because you can always come back from crazy, but you can never get there. Okay? You can always back up, but you can never get there if you decide a little bit is good enough. And so I think one of the things is we started looking, and Ben and I worked together for years on other kinds of things. It wasn't just aerospace. We were all struggling. It wasn't just us. There was a lot of people in the state. We were all struggling with, what are the lever points? What are the tools? What can we do different? What can we create different that's going to be here? And so Ben started the Space Science Center, which was exciting. And we had always done a little bit of work with NASA, Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation, but not a lot of stuff. But we had done some things with NASA Ames. And I was out at NASA Ames one time, and a friend of mine at NASA Ames, a colleague, Craig Schmidt, said, you ought to meet Bob Twiggs. While you're here, he's the space systems director, lab director at Stanford University. He's developed this really new kind of interesting technology. So Bob and I, we actually called up the phone. Bob was in, we went over and started talking to Bob. And the first thing I learned about Bob is he's really enthusiastic. And the other thing I realized about Bob is what he tells you it will cost is generally a factor of 20 less than it actually cost. So Bob was enthusiastic, and I said, this is really interesting, this whole idea of miniaturization of technologies for space and things like that. I said, Bob was, oh yeah, you could build one of these for like $50,000. Well, it wasn't quite that cheap when we got back. But he got us into it. It was kind of a bait and switch, but it was okay. So we got in, and we actually, Bob was so enthusiastic, we began to come back, and actually, really, I think the first person I talked to about it was Ben, because I knew he would probably be the only person that I could mention it to that wouldn't say, you're out of your mind. And he looked at me and said, yeah, that sounds interesting, let's do it. So we started collaborating and figuring out how we were going to do this. And again, this is part of the emergence of this. So we basically began to, we literally hacked together money. We created a nonprofit company. At first it was called Kentucky SAT, and we changed the name to Kentucky Space. We literally sold shares to university, even though they weren't shares, to get their students involved. We went out and raised money from private companies. We hacked together enough money to send a group of students to NASA Ames. We opened an office at NASA Ames, which we still have, to learn how to build these miniature satellites, these small technologies. And it kind of took off from there. And then, Ben retooled the Science Center but in addition to a lot of the amazing astrophysical physicist things that they were doing there, to other kinds of things, and started building CubeSats and all the subsystems. And of course, he had already had the ground station. So amazing things started to happen, and we got other universities involved, and that was really the beginning of this kind of new area. And then as innovation happens, and the circuitous nature of innovation and the unpredictability of it, and I might add to this is also true. We actually announced that we had a press conference and announced the creation of Kentucky Space. I think Artie Fletcher was governor at that time. And after it was over, I remember I got back to my office and I got a call from a friend of mine in the state government who said, people are just rolling over in the aisles, laughing at you guys, thinking this is the most ridiculous waste of time and money that anyone could ever imagine. And of course, all that did was piss me off. It didn't discourage me at all. One of the things you have to learn if you're going to be in the innovation business, you have to thrive on rejection, because you're going to get rejected a lot on a lot of stuff. But that set us down that path. And so we started designing, launching small satellites, and began expanding in a lot of different areas. And as luck would have it, suddenly we got a reputation. We started to get a reputation as being this kind of group of renegades who knew how to put together things really good that worked and really cheaply. And a company came to us and said, we've heard about you guys, and we need somebody to build a piece of technology for us for the International Space Station. And we think you might be the ones to do it. So we said, the other rule that we have is we never say no to anything. We always say yes. Yes, we can do that. And because what I've learned is that you've always had time to get out of something. If it doesn't work, you can always say, we thought we could do this, but we don't think we have the resources, whatever. But once you say no, all your options are over. It's like the wave collapse in quantum physics for all you quantum physics fans out there. And so we said, sure, we can do that. And so we started to embark on that. And we built a piece of, can can you bring that the first video up, the space station video? It was the. This is actually, so what happened is we built this. This is actually a piece of technology built in Kentucky that's being installed on the space station several years ago by Shannon Walker. We actually ended up building 2 of those, and those are R&D platforms that were built in design, co-designed, and been put on the International Space Station, and are still on the space station and being used by this commercial company. So we started to diversify and take a lot of the knowledge and that we had learned in the application and move that into the space station. And as we did that, we began to see something else that was kind of interesting that started to pop up. We started to do some, as we were building this platform, one of the R&D applications for this platform is biomedical, the ability to do biomedical experiments on the space station. And as we did this, we discovered, I don't know if the right word is discovered, we uncovered maybe, the fact that people actually didn't know very much about how living systems and disease processes operate outside of gravity. As we were building, we had to talk to a lot of doctors and researchers about how to build these platforms. Must be the long version. They can turn it off because they're not paying attention to me now, they're all looking at this. How you can do all of this stuff. And we thought, well, this is kind of interesting. We're talking to, how do we build this? And people were saying, well, we don't really know. And it turned out that, as we know now, that most of the work that's been done on biomedical work in space has been done on astronaut health. And, space is a nasty place. If you want to try people alive there for long periods of time, on voyages to Mars, there's still a lot we have to understand. And but there really hadn't been much done elsewhere. And Twyman Clemens, who's one of our engineers and actually the president of Space Tango, is fond of saying, we're not so concerned about the 6 people up there on space station as the 7 billion down here. And so we spent literally the next 2 years going around talking to people all over the world in the biomedical area, including Nobel Prize winners. And we basically validated that this is something that people don't understand, or we don't understand, and we need to understand. And so we came up and hacked together this new idea, which is called exomedicine. And exomedicine is we define as the research, development, and commercialization of medical solutions in space, in microgravity environment of space for application on Earth. And we decided to create another body called the Exomedicine Institute, which was just recently created, which is another nonprofit. Kentucky Space is also a nonprofit. And we also created last year, because of the progress that we were all making, a for-profit company called Space Tango. So the enterprise, when we talk about space and aerospace, what we refer to our niche as entrepreneurial space. The idea that we're building very, very small, high-value, very innovative, creative, modest cost platforms, whether they be satellites or subsystems or computers for those small sats, or ground operations, or in this case, stuff for the International Space Station. And so we embarked upon this, and we created an initial science committee advisory team. One of the original 4 members of that was Dr. Barry Bloomberg, who was the Nobel Prize winner in medicine. He was the gentleman who discovered the hepatitis B virus and vaccine, who became just an enormous fan and supporter and advocate of exomedicine and its ability to create something. But one of the things to get back to how this all ties back, that when we created, when Bob created the CubeSats, designed the CubeSats, and now he's got a new crazy idea that's even more half-wit than that, these pocket cubes. And we actually launched a couple of them a couple years ago out of Russia, and they worked. And so this was his latest crazy idea that's now beginning to filter through the system. Is that we were creating something new. We were creating something. Peter Thiel, who was one of the PayPal founders and has a great book out now called 0-1, to create something new. The Exomedicine Institute is the only exomedicine institute in the entire world. It's in its infancy. That phrase was coined here. The research that we're doing has been developed here. The word exomedicine didn't exist 3.5 years ago. You can Google it, you'll see it's used all over the place. There are companies, pharmaceutical companies in Europe now that basically say we do exomedicine research. You can perform exomedicine research through the things that we do. And so it's beginning to really bubble up, and it's really beginning to take form, and something that we're very, very excited about. But again, it is this idea of creating something new. And again, from our standpoint, it's an important part of what's going on in aerospace, and it's also an important part of SOAR and what's going on at Morehead State University. Because when you think of economic development and innovation and creativity, and we look at the challenges that we have, not just in Eastern Kentucky, but in Kentucky as a whole, you have to look at it like you look at your own investment portfolio. And if you think of your own investment portfolio, you've got 3 or 4 pieces to it, right? You've got your capital protection piece. You've got the one piece where you're almost zero risk. It's just protecting what you have, making sure it's there for a rainy day, making sure that you can continue to live and your family, etc. And then there's another piece that's a little bit more, kind of a little bit more risk. Another piece is kind of intermediate risk, where maybe you got some, a few bonds, a few stocks, some other kind of things. And then there's a piece of it that's the high risk, high return piece. And we all have that in our portfolio. We all have to decide, how much of that we're comfortable with. Are we comfortable with 10%, 5%, 3%, whatever. But we also know that if we're ever going to make a lot of money, it's going to come from that high risk, high return piece. And that's how you have to think about development and you think about it with your SOAR. None of those things are mutually exclusive. It's not that you don't, we should need this, but we don't need this. And I think that a lot of times we've gotten bogged down in Kentucky when we talk about science and technology because people have thought it's in place of something. Well, that means if you're talking about advances in science, then we shouldn't be attracting companies. Nobody's saying that. You need all of those things. The formula and the proportion of that you have to decide. And I think I would argue, that in Kentucky, the problem we've had is not that we haven't had smart people and things, but we've had too little of that high risk, high return piece. We haven't taken enough risk. We haven't taken the steps to create something to go from 0 to 1 and challenge, and basically do that. And I think with entrepreneurial space, with aerospace, that's what we're trying to do. We're not there yet. It's a struggle. It's hand-to-hand combat, but we're trying to do something that's creating 0 to 1. And I think for SOAR, that's an important piece. Because if we're really going to break out of the mold and provide the kinds of 21st century opportunities in East Kentucky, we have to do some things that are crazy. Not everything, but some of the things we do have to be crazy. And so some of the crazy things that we're doing right now with respect to space, we're building small satellites that didn't exist a decade ago and sending them to the moon. I really wasn't that impressed. I thought he was talking Mars last night, but he said just the moon. We are working to create new platforms for this International Space Station. We are doing experiments and developing this new kind of discipline of exomedicine. We've already flown probably a half dozen exomedicine experiments to the station. We're in the middle of one right now with Tufts University looking at regenerative tissue and regenerative medicine. They're interested in finding out, basically there's some interest in thinking that microgravity actually may be a better environment to look at things for certain kinds of regenerative problems like spinal cord injuries, regenerating limbs, tissues, other kinds of things. And so one of the things we just did was we took some planarian flatworms, and basically planarian flatworms are almost immortal. When you cut them up in different areas, they grow their heads back, they grow their tails back, depending upon the electromagnetic field and orient themselves, and et cetera. So we took 30 of those. We partnered with FedEx Space Solutions. Kelvin back there was actually with FedEx and Morehead graduate, right? Morehead graduate? You didn't get kicked out, did you? No, okay. So he's Morehead graduate and doing some amazing things. You'll see him for today and talk to him about what FedEx Space Solutions is about. And we basically delivered these to space on a SpaceX vehicle. They splashed down about a month ago. We bet them out when they came back, took the organics, biologicals, moved those back through FedEx to Tufts University, and are now analyzing those. And I can tell you, while we don't have the full analysis yet, we've already got some preliminary work back from Tufts Labs, and they've already told us that they've seen an expression in the worms that does not occur in nature, which is exactly why you do exomedicine, because what you're doing is you're going to a new frontier. You're going into an area where we literally do not know the answers. And that's the exciting part. So they've seen an expression that does not occur on Earth, which is why exomedicine is so important. There are 4 forces in nature. When you extract gravity out, you're taking out one of those forces, and all your assumptions, all your intuitions about how you think things work, living systems, disease processes, cancer cells, Alzheimer's, diabetes, we don't know how they function outside of gravity. and say, well, why, yeah, but that's space, why would we care? For three reasons that we think why this is important. One is that we will open up new pathways, this kind of research, and there have been some people who have done this under basically space biology or whatever, so I'm not suggesting we invented space biology, but the idea of packaging it is really strategic and focusing it on treatment, or basically interventions for people on Earth, is that, one, you'll see pathways and new ideas that you didn't think existed. It's going to give you new insights into how perhaps different kinds of interventions and treatments. And we've already seen some of that. There's been a few things that have come back from station in the past that have led to some new pathways for pharmaceuticals, which are kind of interesting. Secondly, that we believe that we will be bioengineering materials in space, biological materials, etc. A little bit of a diversion, because our first, which I'll talk about, we've actually working with a company now outside of the biomedical area, who wants to use a facility that we have on station, will have on station, to beta test the manufacture of fiber optic cable in microgravity. Because you don't get settling in space that you do on Earth, and it's actually much clearer and much more efficient. And so they want to test, and so we're working with them on that. So there are other applications other than this, but right now we're talking about exomedicine. And then the third thing is that, and while this is a little bit more out there, maybe a little bit more Star Trek-y, we don't think it's unreasonable, and Dr. Bloomberg agreed, is that perhaps one day we'll actually transport people to low Earth orbit to be treated for certain diseases and conditions, because the systemic changes in your body are so different and so great that we can see different kinds of responses and interventions, perhaps, that work in space that don't work on Earth. And so we're doing work, we've done work with Moorhead in cancer, in glioblastoma. We're doing work in regenerative medicine. We're working on a very interesting pathway right now on cystic fibrosis. We've done some white papers on Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases, and it's all a brand new area, so we're pulling these things together and trying to create these pathways. We're also doing, and I have some brochures for you for this, we're also going to be doing on May 20th an Exomedicine one-day workshop conference in Boston, which is really the center of the biomedical community on this topic. And we just, so that's going to be going on May 20th, and if you would like to come, you're welcome. We're going to have people coming. Our CF team is going to be coming from Ireland. We're working on the cystic fibrosis with some doctors in Ireland, people there from Frankfurt, Germany, a number of NASA people, scientists. So it'll be a really good opportunity to get more into this. And so that's kind of the area of kind of how we got to this whole area of exomedicine, why we're so interested in it, why we're excited about it. And what I'd like to do now is to show a short video with a little ending that we put together. And I'll talk a few minutes more and then open up for questions about this whole issue of creating something new. And what's called, they refer to, which we can talk about the big idea, they refer to as moonshot thinking. The idea of really thinking big and how we can do it and how important it is.
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology bring them to reality. And that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Galileo is such a hero, in thinking big, and what he represents to me is both curiosity and wonder that humanity had, that pushed him and drove himself to invent and work on the first telescopes that allowed us to see the moon, and here we are.
These aviation pioneers were figuring it out as they went. No one really knew how to build an airplane, right? No one knew how to fly an airplane. It was amazing and crazy and wonderful, and they wanted to explore.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
There's so many challenges in the world, and you could feel daunted by that, and sort of oppressed by that, or you kind of say, how might we think differently about this?
Everyone else in the world is working on the next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. One of the things that's really critical is not only having the courage to keep trying every day or thinking big, even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
I think our ambitions are a glass ceiling on what we can accomplish.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
I believe in the human spirit, and I believe that there are always going to be crazy people who will get out of bed one morning and say, you know what? I think I can build a space elevator, and let's go and do it. But I think that if we become afraid to take these great big risks, we stop inspiring people. We stop achieving things. And the biggest nightmare scenario is that we won't have what it takes to solve the really big challenges.
When Kennedy said that we would put a man on the moon, it's about the fact that he said, we don't know how to do this yet, and we're gonna do it anyway. And that sends chills up everybody's spine. Because if that happens, what couldn't we do?
That's okay. So that's our big vision. That's our big moonshot question. What if the next revolution in medicine isn't on the planet Earth? And that the slides that you just saw of those that institute with the Exomedicine is actually not, something we picked off the internet. That we actually designed that. We actually, a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, we contracted with some space artists and worked with people at NASA to actually envision what an exomedicine lab and institute might look like in space. A facility that allowed you to do bioengineering of products and pharmaceuticals and tissues and other kinds of things. And also had an area where you might be treating people in microgravity for certain kinds of, some of these terrible diseases that we haven't been able to find answers for. So that's our moonshot idea. That is not science fiction in this sense. The first part of that institute lab goes to space station on December 3rd of this year. We have a laboratory that we have designed and built that is being launched on SpaceX 9 to the station. Will become a permanent laboratory on station to do exomedicine and other kinds of research. So the first brick, if we can say that, in that vision is going to space station in just several months to allow us to expand dramatically the amount of work that we're doing. And then the next lab, that particular lab allows us to do somewhere between 25 and 30 exomedicine experiments simultaneously, which is a factor of 5 to 10 better than they can do up in station now. The next lab that's designed right now to go up in about 18 months will allow us to do, and our partners and people working with us, we're doing this by ourselves, we're not smart enough to do this by ourselves, will allow us to do basically over 1,000 exomedicine experiments using the latest technology in microfluidics and other kinds of things. And so this isn't science fiction, it's happening right now. And it's happening through the hard work over the past 5 or 6 years of people like Ben and Twyman Clements and many, many other people at the University of Kentucky and others that have been come together along with our partners at NASA, at CASIS, FedEx Space Solutions. And the third part I'll leave you with is that we have offices now at Kennedy Space Center. We're the Space Life Sciences Lab because that's where our launches take place with SpaceX. We have an office at NASA Ames Research Center in the heart of Silicon Valley. We work with a lot of companies there. We've got an NDA right now with Google. We're working on some really interesting ideas with Google for astronaut interfaces using Google Glass and Space Tango and Kentucky Space are basically in Lexington. We have a new space design lab coming up. And our latest thing that we've talked to the president about is we're very interested in citing the Exomedicine Institute here in Morehead, Kentucky, which would be, again, if we were to do that, would be the only institute of its kind in the entire world. Something that's not a 10% improvement for East Kentucky and Morehead, but it is that kind of moonshot idea. Thank you. Any questions? Comments? Think I'm nuts? Yes.
Kris, I love the idea of having an Exomedicine Institute here in Morehead, Kentucky. Say a little more about what that might entail. I mean, this is the most amazing moonshot notion. I love this idea of research in zero gravity. What would it mean to have an office here? I know it's in process.
Well, first of all, one of the great things about this idea, and because it's the technology, we're able to build. The lab that we're putting on Space Station is the size of a big suitcase. And again, it's because of the miniaturization of technologies and the innovation in computer power that we're able to do that. We will also have in our laboratory, and as the Exomedicine lab, we'll have a ground control station. We'll have 24-hour access to the International Space Station and the astronauts. What that would really mean is that I think, one, it would become a nexus for, first of all, some really, really, really bright people. And some of those people would be from here. It's not like we're going to bring them all in. They already are. Ben's group is building that stuff with a lot of native talent, as well as people from other places. So one, you would have some incredibly bright people working here. Secondly, you would have, you would be working on some of the most difficult, challenging, but important ideas and problems in the world today, because a lot of these issues that we're working on, like cystic fibrosis, like Alzheimer's, these scourges have been around a long time and we haven't found solutions for them. And space is like coming across a new rainforest that we haven't explored, and going in and finding all of these exotic plants and things that we don't know what the medicinal powers might be. We don't even know if they will be there, but the chances, the probability are actually quite high. And I also think one of the things we want to do with Exomedicine that we're actually working on now at the beginning is we want to develop as quickly as possible. First of all, one of the things we need to do is we need to hire somebody to run the institute. We need to bring in a really, really top biomedical person with vision and passion to do this. And then we want to start a fellowship program to offer 6 month and 1 year fellowships to people, young people particularly all around the world who want to study exomedicine and do research in this area. We get calls regularly from people all over the place wanting to do internships in exomedicine. And in fact, I got a call about 2 months ago from a young student in Spain who wanted to know if they came to Kentucky, could they get a PhD in exomedicine? So it's something that's starting to get traction. I think it would be an incredible center and nexus for knowledge and ingenuity and innovation. It would also be an inspiration, I think, to people. And again, it would be the only Exomedicine Institute in the world. And to create something new, you have to do something new. We can't, sometimes we get, and we're guilty of this too, so, we'll get a $500,000 grant in biotechnology and say, oh, now we're going to be a leader in Kentucky in biotechnology. No, we're not. We're 30 years behind everybody else. We don't have the capital, we don't have the history to do that. This is an area where we do. We're not a follower, we're the leader. Okay, thank you very much.